All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Scott Farrow, and today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, and that is business planning. So, Scott, I know we just went through this personally for our joint LLC company, and I mean, where do we want to start?
Well, shoot. I mean, not to toot our own horn, but the timing of this podcast is pretty good.
Yeah.
As we're approaching 22, we wanted to take a second and kind of spend some time talking about, our goals, but also kind of our experience with goal planning and go from there. So, I mean, you lead us off. We really wanted to talk about it because of how important it is. You want to start with some of the points?
Yeah. The first thing I want to share for everybody is a quote that you put in our notes, and I think is crazy good, that I've heard before but had kind of forgotten about. And that is, if you are failing to plan, then you are planning to fail.
Yes, sir.
So essentially, if you're not putting in the work to business plan and plan for your business, where you want to go, what you want to do, then you are planning to fail. You are setting yourself up for failure and not success.
Yeah. The big thing is that, like, if you're a business owner and you don't have a pathway that you're following, you're just going to go any which direction that, you meet. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're typically somebody who already kind of is a visionary or somebody who's constantly jumping, right? Like, if you are just an employee, you probably wouldn't be in this position to begin with, but you're somebody who likes to kind of break the normal path or break the normal mold.
Yeah.
So, it's important when you're looking at your business to take some time to step back, especially this time of year is a really good time because you can look at your last year, and obviously there's a really easy calendar reset coming up with January to start deciding how you want your business to look for the next year. And sometimes this is good because some businesses are fiscal years, so maybe you do this in April because your fiscal year is in May.
Yeah.
But for us, our fiscal year is January 1.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really important just to help keep track of where you're wanting to go.
Yeah. And something that we were taught since first getting into this business, something that I know each of us have struggled with and come across our own challenges with, is kind of this concept of being able to easily get distracted and not really have anything to follow, right?
Yeah.
And something that can kind of tie into that is, focusing on one thing or a few key things instead of trying to spread yourself too thin and not gaining any traction on any one of those many things.
Yeah.
But finding your niche and being able to hit the ground running, making sure you're planning for success.
Yeah. Well, and you also can leverage knowledge from other people. You and I have both had to go back and relook at our calendars. One of the things that we learned was calendaring everything. And I think we've talked about it in other episodes. But when it comes to your goal planning, if you're sitting down and looking at your calendar from the last year and you don't know what you're doing, it's probably because you didn't have goals set. And when you don't have your goals set, you can't make plans, right? So it's been really helpful for us, because then you deal with the feeling of being busy but not being productive less often. And you and I, admittedly have dealt with feeling like we're super busy and not making any money.
Yeah.
And that's not why we're in business.
No, I know. And I was going to say, for anybody out there who has, I mean, even in your normal 9-to-5 job or
any job,
whatever it is, if you say you haven't felt the feeling of being busy but not being productive at all, I mean, come on. You're straight up lying. I know.
Yeah.
Even now, it's funny and we struggle with it and we do our best to combat it. But even now, I know there's times where, half an hour goes by and then me and you just kind of look at each other and go,
what did we just do?
What the heck just happened the last half hour? What did we do? I mean, were we really do anything?
We'll have it for full days or half days.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah. So I think the important part is recognizing it first and foremost, because if you don't recognize that, it's just even more detrimental and you're on a path to not going anywhere. But then it's recognizing it and seeing how to pivot and how to move forward and how to improve on it.
Absolutely. We're going to have to do a whole podcast on calendaring.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of experience of how not to do it.
Yeah.
And we could share a lot and some of the wins that we have there. But we're talking about goal planning today. The other big key thing to me about like setting goals is setting expectations, and obviously we'll talk about sharing our goals personally, but not only do you have that, but I think you and I are both people that strive a lot off of setting expectations. And so when you set goals and you have these goals written out and you have them defined, the expectation of how much work is needed to do it becomes much more easy to comprehend, otherwise, have you ever had that where you go and somebody asks you like, what do you do for work? And you have to try to explain what you do. Yeah. If you didn't have a goal that kind of helped guide what you do, maybe you wouldn't be able to explain that. Yeah. And being able to explain it to yourself is even more important.
Yeah. And another thing we noted on here was discipline equals freedom. And I know that's something you wrote down. And why don't you explain that a little bit more? Because it relates back to allowing yourself to have more structure and more discipline that way. But how does that equal more freedom?
It's such a complex topic. It would be its own entire podcast by itself, like not just episode, entire show. Yeah. I can't break it down perfectly, but here's my understanding. When it comes to discipline equals freedom, there's a few points. One, when you're disciplined, you make enough money to become free from the financial stress. That's one of the big ones for me. Mm-hmm. Two, when you've set goals and expectations to reach the goals, you don't have to worry about, am I going to make it? So you free yourself of the stress and the anxiety and all that. And I'm still struggling to make it to that point. And then finally, like when you set that, you don't have to worry about what am I doing today? Like if you have a goal set, I'm going to, sell X many houses, and to sell X many houses, I need to sell this many per month or whatever. And you break it down. Each day you come in, you don't have to worry. Well, like now what do I have to do to make $1 so that I can pay my bills? It's like, oh, I just have to do these things, and it's a checklist. So the discipline allows you to have freedom of thought and freedom of emotional stress, freedom of financial burden. I think that's really why I wrote it down.
Yeah, and not to dive too deep into that, but I think it's, like you said, a really interesting and an important concept is to have that discipline and that structure and all of that now, so that later, you can be more free with your time later instead of now when you're not able to have the resources to be able to afford to be kind of just free flowing and not really doing anything.
And also like the freedom and discipline, like sometimes I think freedom is like the thought that you can do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Like I don't view freedom as the ability to do anything I want, but the freedom to have the options to do the things that I want to do that help push me towards the right path. Like I have the freedom to only sell real estate, not sell real estate and wait tables at Ruth's Chris at night. Yeah. That's kind of what I meant.
Gotcha. Let's talk about, and we mentioned it a little bit, let's talk about when you should be setting your goals, doing your business planning for the following fiscal year or the following new year. Let's talk about when, because I think it's really important to keep in mind, and what people may not realize is, okay, I'm going to business plan a week before, my fiscal year starts, or a week before the new year start. And then you're looking at your goals and you're looking at how you're going to achieve them and what you need to do. And it gets kind of, if you're doing it right, it should be overwhelming if you're doing it a week in advance, because
it's a rehaul.
It's a complete rehaul. You're going to be needing to do different things if you're wanting to grow and do your business more. You can't do what you did the previous year and expect to grow by doing the same exact thing.
What are your thoughts on when you would do it?
So I've heard people say different things. I think this year we ended up doing it in mid-November, maybe a little bit earlier. I would have been happy with doing it a little bit earlier than that. I still think our time frame was good, which was about a month and a half, almost 2 months in advance of the new year. I'd say the sweet spot is probably between 2 to 3 months in advance. You obviously don't want to do it so far in advance because you don't have enough, and you don't have enough metrics for the current year itself to be able to tell yourself, hey, what do I want to do next year? Yeah. So I think that sweet spot is probably between 2 and 3 months. What would you say?
I think where we did it this year was maybe a little bit late. We live in a 60 to 90 day life cycle, I think is what everybody says in real estate. And so for us, anything that we're looking at closing starting in October, there's a good chance that it could be money made in the new year. So that's part of it. If you're in a faster business, maybe that's not true. But that's the way our leads and our deals work. For me, the only other thought that I have about doing it any sooner is you don't have the freshness of mind. So it's important to give yourself time to implement new things. For us, we implemented a new CRM. We implemented new business standards. We're implementing new legal, contractual obligations between both of us. Mm-hmm. We have new education, everything. So we had a lot of systems to overhaul. Maybe if your only goal is to upgrade your revenue, or increase that, you just need to give yourself enough time to get your marketing, your top of funnel behaviors up to the point where by January 1 or whenever your start date is, you've already set yourself up for the success metrics, right? Yeah. And ramping up before your timeline starts. Otherwise, you don't even give yourself a full year. Yeah. And this is any kind of business that requires lead. What would maybe be lead follow-up or lead maturation, anything where it takes time. That's the big thing for me.
Yeah. Well, let's use that CRM as an example, right? Because transferring CRMs, transferring data, getting onto a whole new system doesn't happen overnight. No. It doesn't happen in a week. It in our case, didn't even happen in a month. I think we're approaching 2 months and we're still not 100% completely dialed in on one system. Right. So if we're wanting to go into 2022 or the next fiscal year for our business, hitting the ground running and make sure everything is firing on all cylinders so we can hit those goals, we're going to want all this stuff that's needed for that to be done, which is why I think doing it in advance is essential.
Yeah. And outside of just establishing your goals that time in advance, it's important, in my opinion, to also bring up the constant reviewing. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about this, but keeping a track on where you're at too. So don't just put your goal out once and then not think about it again. You'll never hit your goal that way, and so even if you plan way in advance, I think it's really important. Like for us, the first week of January, we're going to sit down and we're going to spend more time in that first week of January than we normally would, so we can start ingraining the ideas of what we're doing, or engraving the ideas into our brain. That way it's continuous for us. We have to develop some kind of a system to review.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, obviously, we've talked a little bit about timing and goals. For people who've never ran a business, or even people who do run a business, we're not experts in goal setting, but we've attended a couple different years of doing this, and we feel like after peer reviewing this with a few people that we have at least a pretty good system for a start. Yeah. When we were sitting down talking and looking at our goals, what was the first goal that we were establishing?
Revenue.
Not profit.
Profit/revenue.
Those are the two to me.
The money coming. Okay.
Revenue was the first. Clarify.
Revenue coming into the business, and then at the end of the day, profit, and then going even further, our gross payout personally, because we are paid through the business, right? But looking at it in the business perspective, revenue.
Why would revenue be the easiest number to pick first?
Well, not only can you go kind of work backwards based off of your current year, right? You can look at your revenue and say, okay, to get this revenue, I had to close 10 transactions. Right. So if in taking a deep dive more, 10 transactions for X amount at X amount of commission, right? Mm-hmm. So looking forward, if you're wanting to grow your revenue, if you're going by percentages, 10%, or if you're looking at a dollar amount of revenue, you can say, okay, it took me 10 houses at X amount of X commission to do this. And then it's just a formula, math, to project those numbers for the next year. So if you're wanting to jump your revenue to X amount, then I'll just need to do 2.3 more transactions at the same X average price and X average commission in order to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to see on paper because you can project using math.
It's pretty simple. There's very few variables. Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. So for us, we looked at revenue. We calculated our revenues based off of real data. So we've been tracking our commissions and our income on Excel, which is not a great way of doing it, but it's been very consistent. Yeah. So we have last year's, and we figured it out. We figured out what Scott's average commission rate is, your average commission rate. We looked at how many deals I did, how many deals you did, both of our average sales. Mm-hmm. We use that to help decide our revenue rate. we kind of intermixed our profit margin with our revenue. So I started with, this is what I want my profit margin to be with. And you started with, this is what I want my profit margin to be with. And then we picked revenue that we felt would be reasonable to get that profit margin. Now, for both of us, the big thing too that we couldn't predict is, in order to increase our revenue, we have to increase our ad spend, right?
Yes.
Or any kind of, so, we can't just multiply it, linearly is my understanding. Now, there's a chance that it goes up or down, but we try to just follow our gut feeling on this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're going to be able to look at this, and this is where tracking is important. As we look, we have year-to-date P&Ls that we review, and we'll be able to see what our profitability looks like and then adjust our goals for what our payout is. Because essentially, we don't work for revenue.
Yeah.
We work for profit.
Yeah. And I think that's important for any new investor, any new agent, anybody, starting out in any sales position or in any position to business plan for the following year and what your goals are. Those are important things that you need to, one, be able to see and analyze for the current year. Because if you don't have your current year stuff in an organized fashion that you can look at, then how are you going to know where to start to business plan for the next year, right? And so when we're talking about what kind of things we're including when we're business planning, I think those three things we talked about are huge: revenue, expenses, and profit. And being able to look at your current year and how those numbers have played out, where you've spent what it's led to. Yes. And then moving that and transitioning it into the next year.
And the other part to that is we're not necessarily doing a deep dive on where our market spend went, like where our expenses went. That's something that we do a little bit later. We set the goal at the start to figure out what we want to do. That's the goal. And then the planning section, that's after. And so, if this year you only spent, $12,000 in marketing and you want to do 4 times as much business, there's a chance that you can only spend 4 times as much in your ad spend. But there's also a chance, like maybe there's a different way, because now you're breaking into a market of 50,000 a year. Maybe there's a different tool that, actually does more than 4,000 or 4 times your amount, right? That's where both of us are at this year, is we're figuring out what services we can pay into to free up our plate to make more top of funnel.
Yeah. And in addition to those, kind of big 3 items, other stuff that we also include in a business planning, what we hear you should be incorporating into business planning is, depending on if you're in sales, investments, or X, Y, and Z, is 1, either volume, or 2, the number of deals that you want to close.
Units closed.
And by volume, we mean the final sales price of a home. I want to sell $10 million worth of real estate this year. Help, whether on the buying side or selling side, right? So volume or number of closed deals.
Right. And again, it comes down to, then you have to set the expectation of how many deals you want to actually participate in, because the more deals you participate in, the more time suck there is. But the lower the lower commission, usually the easier it is to get the deal.
Yeah.
And so then it's a balancing game. How many deals do I want to do, and how much do I want to make per deal? And that defines how much volume you want to make.
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of more realtor specific, and obviously we spend a lot of time as realtors, so that's important to us. If you're an investor, a different way of quantifying it would be what your average assignment fee, flip profits, assigning average profits and goal profits. That way, when you run your numbers, you don't have to question, okay, how much do I want to make? Every offer you make, you look at it, you say, okay, this is a flip, 40K profit. That's my goal.
Yeah.
And then we all know that when you set your goal as 40K profit, there's a chance that you don't make it. But I'll tell you what, you're not going to have nearly as many 20K profits.
Yeah.
Right? For any deal you do accept, you get accepted. Now you realize, okay, well, if that makes my numbers lower, I need to market to more people. I need to find more motivated sellers. I need to be better at closing, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So that's an important thing if you're an investor.
So what about non-monetary stuff? What about business planning aspects that don't have to do with any numbers for the business or profitability for the business? What other stuff can you include in business planning that doesn't have to do with the numbers that is still really important?
Yeah. Different things that we've looked at in the past. So we've gotten incorporated. That was a goal in 2020.
Yep.
Establishing rentals has been one. That's been a goal that we've had in the past. Education or producing any kind of a podcast or any way of giving back. Hours worked has been a big one for us. How little can we work to make the amount of money we want to make? What else are you thinking?
If you're an individual agent and you're looking to bring on a buyer's agent to deal with your buyer leads, to one, again, like you were saying, free up your time, less hours worked, but two, bringing on a buyer's agent at the end of the day is also for profit, which leads back to the numbers. But, goals like that, or,
new
building
CRMs.
out a team, new CRM, exactly. Stuff that is essential and very important to your business, and that can help the numbers, but isn't in itself a monetary goal.
Yeah, the last one I could think of that's really important is financial management. So like we both restructured our business finances, moved to new banks, stuff like that. It's important that like these are really, really good times to get everything changed.
Yeah.
So that way, when you're trying to focus on production, you're not worrying about, whatever, changing your CRM or trying to do in onboarding or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, we'll dive into our personal goals and the big ones that we have. But when you mentioned banks, I was like, could you imagine having to go through that whole bank transfer we did at the beginning of the year when we're really trying to ramp up everything and really make leaps and bounds in our business? That would be such a setback and a headache. Oh my God. I am just so glad we got that done.
Well, when you restart your fiscal year too, it's really important for me. I'm not a financially you and I talk about it very openly, and I'm completely honest in that I get very nervous around finances.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing. In my personal goals, I have a new goal of reviewing my financials every day.
Yeah.
But when you're, starting a new year, having it all set so that you start on the right foot, that's really key. And that's part of where us talking about this at the beginning of November was much more helpful than us waiting until, the week between Christmas and New Year's and saying, okay, we're going to just, sell more houses and make more money. Like now it's okay. My accounts are set up better.
Yep.
The money is there, it's all tied into my accounting software, my CPA's involved. All that is really helpful to have done before the new year starts.
Yeah. And so before we get into each of our personal goals and then our goals for our partnership, let's talk about why it's important to share goals openly, share them with a mentor, with a friend, putting it out there what your goals are instead of just holding them to yourself.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, and it was the first thing that I had put on our notes, and it's kind of funny because it's a hard thing to explain, and I think one of our mentors, Jason, has done it really well, is just putting things out into the universe, right? And by the universe, I mean, putting it out there. If you are a person of faith for God, or putting your goals out there, makes it known that you're wanting to achieve these things and you're going to do anything you can to achieve them. And it kind of falls back to, visualization or affirmations. When you're saying things and all this stuff, when you put those things out there into the universe is more than willing to give that stuff back to you. So like I said, it's kind of a hard thing to explain, but I think that is hugely important.
Yeah, it is. I'm devout Catholic for anybody who knows me, and talking with Jason, he always used the term universe, and he's a Christian guy, and I always kind of was like, well, I wonder what he means by that, and I finally decided that it's okay to call it different things.
Of course.
For me, I try to always put business and my faith in a way that can connect. Otherwise, you're in a state of constant internal battle.
Yeah. And
I realized that I've been told this whole time in business to put it out there what I want to do, to tell people, to show others what I'm doing. And I've also been told to give back to others too, right? So it's giving. And then it ties back to the passage of asking you shall receive. I don't think that there's any disagreement in those two statements.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, asking has always been a way of putting it out there. This is what I would like to do. And then the people that I'm helping constantly, I know they're going to always be bringing back to me, whether or not it's them or something else. I know that as you give, it comes back tenfold. And so, putting your goals out there has been really helpful, because now not only am I putting out what I would like, other people around me are doing it, and we're helping each other, and everybody's getting lifted up that way.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. And I remember when you had first gotten the book, I don't know if you have it on your shelf or know the name of it off the top of your head, but not keeping business and faith separate, but meshing the two. And you may have it up there. Yeah.
Invest Yourself by John Abbott.
Perfect. And so I think that's a super important thing just to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I'm also religious like yourself, but for those who are not, for those who are, I think
it's
regardless,
a universal concept.
It's a universal concept of whoever
greater being,
greater purpose, whatever it is, getting it out there, and just making sure that you're not holding it in and keeping all these things to yourself.
And there's a lot of psychological things. They talk about like cueing and your subconscious. Like I was kind of saying earlier about reviewing your goals. By reviewing it, your brain is being kind of wired to start doing anything it can to get closer. Right? Humans are very good at patterns and pathways and solving problems. And so by constantly daily reviewing your goals, writing them out, there's a lot of things that people talk about. You're setting yourself up to have a better mode of success because your brain's thinking about it. The same way they say, like, don't be, what you feed your brain is really important, about positivity, charity, all the good things that we talk about. It's the same for business. If you have a goal and you review it every morning, when you're working, you're thinking about it. Yeah. So that's something that we really wanted to kind of touch on. You and I are already talking about it in our personal goals.
Yeah.
As having time to really not only put it out there like on this podcast, like what we're about to do, but also to constantly be reminding ourselves and getting that good influence from others and ourselves every day.
Yeah.
It's accountability.
100%. And that's the perfect segue, because I think for those of you out there who struggle to share your goals with other people, who internalize a lot of your goals, I think it's very, very easy. And I would be lying if I say I haven't struggled with this before too, is when you keep these goals to yourself or ambitions to yourself, it's very easy for you to talk yourself down. So if you make the goal and say, okay, I want to close 20 transactions this year, but you're only keeping that to yourself, and 2 months go by, 3 months go by, you're halfway through the year and you've only closed 5 transactions, it's very easy for you to say, oh, you know what? I'll just shoot for 10. And I think the accountability part is huge, because, and that's the purpose of what our weekly meetings are for, and will be continuing into the new year, is not only one, having someone, to kind of be like, dude, what's going on? Like, you need to step it up, not only be there that way,
right, but
also help you find why you're not on pace for your goals. How can we better fix it and pivot to, you may have only closed 5 through the 6 months. How are we going to make sure you close that other freaking 15 these next 6 months? What do we need to do? And what do you need to do to perform to do that?
And it's also, in my opinion, it allows the person who's missing their goals to not, kind of kick themselves while they're down. If you already have somebody there holding you, holding your feet to the fire, you have to have some personal responsibility, but not keeping yourself down because, oh, I didn't make it and I'm crap, or I'm lazy, whatever. Now you also have somebody who says, look, you already missed this. It's time to resolve that. Whatever is there is gone. What did we do wrong? What are we going to do next to make it right?
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. The other part to it too is then when you feel busy and you look back, you can't say, oh, I was busy. If you weren't selling houses, you might be busy, but you were not being productive.
Yeah.
We aren't here to just be busy.
Yeah. And I'll speak for myself, and I think inherently as humans, right, we don't like letting people down, especially if they are family or friends or very close people to us. I don't like letting people down, so if I share my goals with you, when we're sharing them with everybody on the podcast, with our mentors and stuff, I don't want to let you down. I don't want to let all of the listeners to the podcast down who now know my goals. I don't want to let my mentors down. I think it kind of also ignites a little bit of a fire within yourself. Like, all right, all these people know what my goals are.
They're going to know.
And they're going to know if I do it or not. So I better freaking do it.
The last part too is I was listening. I was kind of getting down on myself about kind of my performance, and fiscally it's been a great year, but if my headspace isn't there, then it doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to this video with David Goggins while I was driving to an appointment, and it was a conversation about like what goes through his head when he's dealing with the doubt. And it was funny because I'm sitting there and I'm like, this guy's a physical specimen. He's probably the top of the top. And for people who don't know, he was a Navy SEAL and a Ranger, airborne, ex-military. He's done everything, right? And he was talking about the mindset when he wants to quit. And that's obviously what you feel when you're not going to miss a goal. You're like, well, fine, I'll just quit, and then people won't ask. I'll just be, I quit that. And I was thinking to myself like, and he was talking about how, for his story, there's a 300-pound guy who lost 100 pounds in like 8 months to go to Buds. And if you quit now, you're letting down that guy and every version of that guy that got you to where you are today. And like you and I haven't really dealt with something like that or physical defeat, but like we've had a lot of growing pains. And like you think back to all those times where you're going through something really hard, where you're sacrificing and you're working at night and you wake up early and you're going to the appointments and you're giving up your weekends. And if you quit now on your goal, you're giving up on the guy who already sacrificed. Mm-hmm. Regardless if that's how you want to think about it or not, I thought that was a really interesting way of accountability to yourself.
Yeah.
Because now you can't let go of that person. The other people can let it go because it's not their story. But the guy that's been working for this, who set the goal in November to sell X amount of real estate, he can't quit now. He's already put in 8 months of sales. And if you're going to quit on your goal now, you're only disappointing that guy.
Yeah. And not only are you disappointing that guy, but in our case, you're also disappointing the guy who, 3 years ago or 4 years ago knew nothing about real estate and,
right.
In 1, 2, 3 years has come from knowing nothing about any real estate or any real estate terms with zero knowledge and to closing $10 million in your example worth of real estate this year. You're letting down every
iteration
version of that guy all the way before.
It's just very interesting. And if this is your first year, in the business and you're thinking about planning, whether or not you're coming from school or you're coming from a job, mm-hmm. there's a person who has made significant sacrifice to get to failing.
Yeah.
And failure is not the end. It's, obviously it's a path to success, right? But, by putting your goals out there and by setting the goals and having something that you can refer back to, you allow yourself to push further. And it's the same as when you want to do 10 pull-ups. If you just say, I'm going to do as many pull-ups as I can, you're going to quit sooner than if you say, I'm going to make it to this number. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to keep going. And the first time you hit that little hit of resistance, you're going to quit. But if I have to sell 30 houses and you're only at 22 and you're in October, you better get your ass in gear.
Yeah.
If your goal is to make, your first $100,000 year and you're at 86,000, you aren't going to sleep at night content with where you're at.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't have a goal, you'd say, I already made 86,000, I'm 20 whatever, and I'm doing great in the business, blah blah blah, and I'm my own boss. But if you had that goal, you're not satiated, you're right there.
Yeah. And one last point I want to talk about before we dive in and share each of our goals and then EBI's goals is I think it's also important, whether like you were saying, you're the first year agent, the first year investor, or, second, third, it's important to also be self-aware of, you can't catch yourself looking at other investors, or other friends that who are in the business and seeing them do X amount and say, I'm not doing good if I'm not that, right? Like take our cases for example.
We're just in different spots.
We're at different spots. It would be stupid of me to sit myself down and set the same goals for my business that you have for your business going into 22. It would be stupid of me because there's no way, completely unrealistic. And I think that's one important point. You've got to set realistic but challenging goals, because if you set things that are not going to be attainable, your business is not going to go from $100,000 in revenue every year to $1 million the next year. Yeah, there may be very few cases
of people that have done
that, but 99% of times, doing the same things you've been doing or even tweaking a little bit, you're not going to make that huge jump. So you've got to make stuff realistic. Yes. Challenging, but realistic.
Yeah. It's the smarts. What is it? Specific, reasonable, attainable, or no, smart. It doesn't matter. It's the It's the acronym for setting up goals that are achievable.
Yeah.
The other one that we always use is big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAG. And we both definitely are pushing for that this year, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to put it out there.
Let's do it.
And I'll promise you what, we're doing a wrap-up episode next week is our last recording for 21.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do one in 22, and we're going to reference this podcast about, hey, remember when we put out, this is what we're going to do? Well, here's what we did. All right, you go first.
All right, let's do it.
How about I go? I'll just ask you your questions, right?
Okay,
so
go ahead.
This year, what is Barrett Real Estate Inc.'s goal for revenue?
Revenue goal is $285,000.
Okay.
And
you came up with that number from
how? So as many of you know, we are licensed agents, but we are also investors. So we've got income possibilities from, those two different streams for our business. So broken down into those two, to get the $285,000 in revenue, I would like to do 12 real estate sales, which is one closed transaction every month, right? And for those 12 sales, for that one escrow that's closed every month, I would like an average sale price of $350,000,
which is our market average.
At the 2.5% commission, which right now is lower than my 2020 average.
What's your current 2021 average?
2.88% commission.
I want you guys to remember that number.
So
2.88%. The average commission is typically between 3% and 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So you average closer to 3% than 2.5%.
Closer to 3%. Okay. So, and that averages out $350K average sales price at 2.5% comes out to about $105,000.
Okay.
So 105 of our 285 is now accounted for. And how I'm going to make up that other difference to get to the 285 is I also want to close 12 investment deals.
Okay.
Which again averages out to one closed investment deal a month. Whether that be a flip, whether that be a wholesale, a JV deal, a wholesale, whatever it is, an investment deal with an average, profit of $15,000.
Okay, so we've set our expectation of both sides of your business, and each one has the average profit you have to make from the sales.
Yep.
And you have it in a way that you can each month see exactly what percentage you're at.
100%.
And on our CRM, you have a tracker that is going to be showing you what percent of your goal you're at.
Yep.
By just showing your closed deals in the CRM. So each month at our last Friday meeting, you will be able to look and say, this is how many deals I've completed for X amount total. This is where I am relative to where I'm supposed to be.
Yep. And so we've got the 180 from the average investment profit, and we've got 105 from the average sales profit, which is how we get to the 285,000
now, tell
revenue.
Me, why did you come up with a 285 revenue? Why was that your goal? It's a very specific number.
Yeah. So the 285 was really derived from these two things themselves. So for example, this year I will close 7 real estate transactions on the sales side, right?
Okay.
So I Yeah, and it was funny because we were sitting down and I was like 7, and I was like, okay, I think getting into the double digits, I think 10 is good. And you're like, okay, I mean, if you're going for 10,
why not do 12?
Add on 2 more escrows and make it an average of 1 closed deal a month. And I was like,
it's a very attainable number.
Shit, okay, let's do it. So it was really working backwards from 12. We used the market average of 350 and got the 105.
Okay.
And then an average investment deal, depending on if it's a flip or a wholesale or a wholesale, I went on the conservative side of 15 and won a month, came to the 180. And working backwards from that is how the 285 was attained. So I didn't start with the 285 and then work down from that. I started with what I wanted to do and how I'm going to do it to get to that bigger revenue number.
Now, what's your profit goal?
Profit, I would like Barrett Real Estate Inc. to gross $200K.
Dang.
Yeah. So, and that is, I think what we were talking about in part is looking at the expenses for 2020, looking at your profit and loss and seeing X, Y, and Z, but then also doing your best. And I'll use your marketing channel as an example of paying for a cold caller, right, is going to cost, X amount, or paying for a different marketing channel is going to be X amount. But what can I expect to reasonably come from that? Because we know a lot of other people who use these different marketing channels and have numbers to fall back on. And so, yeah, 285K in revenue, which would then in turn equal about 85,000 in business expenses for the business to gross 200K.
There you go. Now, can you share a couple of your personal ones? You don't have to share all of them, but maybe some of the ones, because I think it's important that people understand too that when we did our goal planning, we weren't just looking at business. Like it's not all about making money. Yeah,
and personally, mine start financial, right? So I would like to, of that 200, right, grossed from the business, personally on paper through being paid through the business, personal income taxes, X, Y, and Z, I would like to make $80,000 on a W-2 through the business, right? Yep. So that is my main goal. I want to make sure I'm set up on that correctly.
So you can buy a house, you can get loans.
Of course, yes, because without a paper trail showing what you're making and doing it correctly, you don't have any report to take and do all that stuff. Exactly.
Okay.
So, and of that 80K, I kind of broke it down a little bit. Wanted to use 30,000 for living expenses, use 30,000 to set away for a down payment on a house, and then the remaining 20K to divide amongst, different sort of investments, whether that be in the stock market, diversifying that way a little bit, or, a down payment on a rental or X, Y, and Z. Other than that, another personal goal I'll share real quick is, a minimum for the entire year, 5 days a week of moving, doing some sort of workout for at least 45 minutes, 5 days a week.
There you go.
So
part came from 75 hard.
Yeah.
Yep. 75 hard kicked our ass at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's me. Let's pivot over to you. So I'll kind of start with the same thing you asked me is Faro Real Estate Inc. What are you wanting your business to make in revenue for 2022?
It is really uncomfortable to say, but I promise that I will get more confident in it, and it is $1 million in gross revenue.
Okay.
7 figures. I had a goal when I was just starting that I wanted to make $1 million before I was 25. This is it. This is the shot. So that's the goal.
And that's fucking baller, dude. I'm so pumped. So working backwards from there, for that $1 million in revenue, how are you going to do it? What are you planning to do in X, Y, and Z to get your business to that revenue amount?
So real estate sales, I set fairly reasonable. So this year I'll close like a little over 10 million, close to 11 million. I want to just do that again. And so for me to do that, this year I sold at 2.63% average commission. So you were at 2.8 something. I'm at 2.6 something. So my average commission actually profits me a little bit less for the deal size. But this year I did 20 or just shy of 26 or 27 houses. I will be closing 25 next year. It makes my average sale $400,000, slightly above market.
Okay.
And I want my average commission payout to be $10,500.
Okay.
So these are all accounting real numbers. This is, in my sales about how much I did this year.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very similar to what I'm going to be done with this year. The big difference, I've been telling everybody I know, I want to be an investor more than an agent.
Absolutely.
So $750,000 in investment income. So for me to do that, I need to be selling 25 investment deals. So I had the goal of 8 flips, making $40,000 profit each. That means I'd have to do 2 every quarter or 1.5 a month. And I'd have to do 17 wholesale deals or wholesale deals, making $25,000 per pop. So this year, my average wholesale was about 30,000. And my average flip, I will only have done 1 this year. It's going to be about 38. So just shy of 40. It was a joint venture. I'm already in contract to negotiate my first ones for the beginning of next year. And I have all of my budgets planned to try to make $50,000 in profit per flip, because I know that flips are going to not always go the right way.
Yeah.
But essentially it means that each month, at the end of the month, I need to be able to sit down at our Friday meeting and say, I sold 2 houses for $800,000 in volume,
Mm-hmm.
and made $21,000 from commissions this month. And that I'd also have to be able to tell you that I have at least $35,000 deposited into my account this year per month for investment deals, plus an additional $80,000 per quarter on top of that. So you can't double dip.
Yeah.
So really what that means is I need to be doing 1.5 wholesale deals at $25K a month, and on top of that doing a flip,
Working on
closing.
the flips for the quarter.
Yeah. So it is going to be an outrageous difference from what I'm at right now. This year I only did, 5 or 6 total investment deals, but I was really working on selling houses, and I had a lot of other stuff going on, getting off the team, doing all that.
Mm-hmm.
Upcoming, my marketing streams are ramped up
Yeah.
infinitely more. Last year I didn't
huge.
market for a single investment deal.
Yeah.
This year I'm going to be marketing and actively finding them.
Mm-hmm.
And then on my resale, I doubt that I only sell 10 million next year. Each year I've added about 4 million in sales. I did it again from last year at 7 point something. Now I'm at 11 point something.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see. I bet those numbers fluctuate a lot, but really the big goal for me, I need to make $83,333 a month. So I don't care how I do it. As long as at the end of each month, my bank statement reads that I added $83,333. That's really what it comes down to for my business.
And of that number, that $1 million number for revenue, what is the profit number for Faro Real Estate Inc.?
The ideal goal is going to be $700K. So that would be where I would like to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's realistic, because going from I'll be just shy of $400K in revenue this year.
Yeah.
I just followed the math on this year's numbers to
Yeah.
next year. But I've already paid into some marketing streams that are going to be a lot more expensive than what I did this year.
Yeah.
I made, like over 6 figures from no marketing. It's kind of an unrealistic expectation. So we'll have to see, but I have the goal at $700K. Personally, I'm not going to be making that much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a real reason to pay myself out that much.
Yeah.
But I'd like my business to do that, and see what it's like.
Yeah.
Be a 7-figure producer.
Yeah. And I know you shared one of your personal goals earlier in the episode, which was, every morning you wanting to make sure you check your financials, be in tune with that, so
Yeah.
it's not as stressful. For you, what are some of your other personal goals for 2022?
So biggest one, I get married next year. So developing my relationship both with Kayla and with everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and managing that's going to be really important. Two, in the mornings, I want to have a routine. This last year, it's kind of been, I wake up and fly to work as fast as possible. So setting up a routine that allows me to get my workout in, meditate on how I feel, participate spiritually, whether through prayer or meditation every morning, and then reviewing my financials. I think those things are really important so that I get and eat breakfast. I haven't eaten breakfast in like 3 years. So
yeah,
I want to get to a point where I wake up and I'm coming to the office as prepared as I can be.
Absolutely.
Because as I've gotten to the end of this year, I noticed that I've just mentally kind of started sagging in keeping up good habits. And so, you know, as next year, I want to make sure that I nourish my own body, because it's going to be a lot of work to do the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. Any last stuff you want to share for personal or Fair Real Estate Inc.?
And part of that morning routine, writing down my goals and affirmations every day. I think I just bought that Project 369.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
No.
Okay, so I bought it yesterday on Amazon. It comes in this week.
Nice.
I'm going to try that out. But
yeah,
essentially, I want to really hone in my mindset, because at this point, I've proven to myself I'm the key person holding myself back from doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's been big.
Yeah, that's been, for those of you who are like, what the heck is Project 369 or this, that, and the other? I've seen it. Jason was the first guy that I saw who had kind of posted, you know, what that is and writing down some of that things and affirmations. But
yeah,
I've seen since then quite a few other investors we know that have used it. And when I've spoken to them, that they've mentioned it without me asking them, and brought it up. So I think that's kind of cool, and it'll be a good resource.
Yeah, last year we did 75 hard at the start of the year.
Yeah.
That was its own beast. This year I'm going to try that, and I think it's important to push yourself hardest at the beginning of the year, because it's like any other game or sport. When you have 4 quarters, your first quarter you got to come out strong. The last quarter you're motivated by your goal. Your heart that comes down to just grit. I really believe that your first and third quarters are huge influencers on how you perform.
Yeah. And all right, like you mentioned, next week we're going to have a really quick wrap-up episode for the podcast of itself, The Pursuit of Property, kind of our year-end review and our goals for the podcast. Those are going to be in the wrap-up. But let's talk about, this thing right here. EBI.
Early Bird Investments.
So if you guys have been if you know us, you've been following our journey for a little bit, you know that in 2020, in a span of
14 days or
18
maybe.
Something crazy. We had gone from 0 to 9 houses in South Bend, Indiana. And then all of 2021, we've actually gone down 1 door. So we went from 9 to 8 houses. We sold off 1 house, which was the move to do.
Yes.
So we are happy with going from 9 to 8 doors with the one we sold off.
Yeah.
But I think this year for us, when we were sitting down and trying to come up with EBI goals, because we're both in this for the long game, right? And the long game is long-term cash flowing rental properties. And I think when we were being completely open and honest with each other, and just for the viewers as well, EBI, we didn't add any doors this year. We spent a lot, probably the first quarter of the year, the first quarter and a half, managing refinances for 4 of them, which if you guys have never gone through a refinance, it definitely is easier for the people on the W-2s and the 9-to-5s,
and not managing tenants and contractors and lenders. And it was our first time.
And essentially, if you think about it, I think we've turned 4 of our properties this year.
We're about to start our 5th.
So that's essentially going through 4 or 5 flips. So it's like we didn't add any doors. We spent a lot of time managing and kind of figuring out how this whole landlord thing
of our own money.
Yeah, $30,000 of our own money, trying to figure out how this landlord thing works. So not to make any excuses as to why we haven't added any doors, because I think that is important for us to do, is to the goal should be to add more doors every year. We will end this year with not having added more doors, being -1. But taking that into account and moving forward into 2022, let's kind of just hit those quick bullet points real quick for EBI.
We want only multi-unit rentals added.
Yep.
And we want to have 12 doors.
Yeah.
So whether that's 6 duplexes, 4 triplexes, 3 fourplexes, a mix of any of that. That's one of our biggest goals.
Yeah. That would take us from our 8 to
20.
Then 20 doors, which I think is completely doable. And I think
it's a respectable number.
Yeah. And I think would be a drastic difference from what we're seeing now with 8 doors. I think 20 doors would be freaking dope.
And the economy of scale starts kicking in the bigger you get.
Yeah, 100%.
Refinance the remaining rentals that we have out of our private money loans and get them transferred into our LLC.
Yeah.
We have really, really good private lenders who like long-term holding, but it eats our cash flow.
By a lot.
So we've been dealing with tenants. We've been, raising a little bit of capital, and most importantly, we are filing our taxes to get better loans. So starting next year, we want to wrap up a few more loans, and we want to get all of our properties put in our LLC so that we are protected.
Completely done.
What about our additional money?
Yeah, so we want to do one transactional, one transaction per quarter. So 4 transactions that bring income in. So separate from a rental property, whether that be a wholesale, a flip, whatever it is out there, a joint venture. We want one transaction per quarter with an average of $10,000 coming into the account. And
the reason for that is because this year we spent $35,000 out of our own pocket.
Yeah.
Had we done 4 transactions at $10,000, we would have net $10,000 extra dollars.
Yeah.
Or $5,000 extra dollars. Obviously, we would be paying taxes on stuff, but we also aren't taking into account tax depreciation.
Yeah. And the final bullet point we have on here, which we are in the process of doing, which is great, which is, the reason why we planned this, at the timing we did going into 2022 is drafting an operating agreement for our LLC. So a lot of you guys are people who are in partnerships right now, or, this, that, and the other. You may be kind of doing things by the fly, which is what we've been doing, which, in the beginning is nothing wrong, right? We're great friends. You've got to have something in writing, not only to outline, the ownership of the company, split 50, so it's on paper, signed by both parties, but it's also important for, if anything were to pop up. Like, for example, if, I fell on times where I came to you and I said, look, I want to get out of all of these 8 rental properties. How do we go about doing that? Right. So I think drafting that operating agreement, that there may come a time where we'll need to use it, but it's really there for our own protection and
keeps your relationship better.
Yeah, exactly. So that
again, it sets an expectation and it sets a guideline. The other thing that we had talked about, I'm getting married. It's like, if I die, Kayla obviously would be taking over the ownership. Yeah. That's just how. So we need to establish how that would look.
Yeah.
So that's the big non-monetary change.
Yep. And that's all I have for our EBI stuff.
That's all I have. Other than that, we have a podcast. The goal of getting a podcast episode out a week, we got really organized on this. Obviously, you can tell our content is now consistent again.
Yeah.
We really wanted to share this podcast today to get our goals out, to explain why we wanted to get our goals out. And we're going to be doing Facebook posts and Instagram posts with this.
Yep.
So you can refer back to it and hold us accountable, keep our feet to the fire. Is there anything else you want to add other than we're going to be doing a 21 wrap up?
I don't think so. I mean, as always, as we say every episode, if you guys are struggling with anything related to what we talked about today, need some guidance on business planning, new agent, new investor, questions on literally anything that we might be able to help out with, we're always here. As always, you can find us on social media. Shoot us an email at pursuitofproperty@gmail.com. I mean, we are literally here for you guys. We run this podcast for you guys.
Yep.
We spend, an hour and a half, 2 hours a week on this podcast for you guys. So we are always here for you.
Absolutely. And by the time you see this, it is Christmas time. So Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next week before the Happy New Year's.
That's right. All right. Thanks, guys.